I do not trust your industry. That one sentence was given to me as a reason by a client why they have delayed taking action concerning their hearing health for over 10 years. And my answer was, I really don't blame you. It is confusing and sometimes not transparent. Welcome to Earman Dan. If you're new here, my name is Daniel and a very warm welcome. I'm a hearing care professional and the owner of Ear Studio in Castle Hill in Sydney. But more importantly, I spend my days helping people, not just to hear better, but actually to understand better and leave behind the challenges of hearing loss. And in this channel, I break down how hearing really works, how the hearing care landscape looks in Australia, and what you can do to get the best possible outcome. Now, I invite you to follow along in this journey. Now, in this video, I'm going to explore the landscape in the Australian hearing care industry. Briefly, though, I want to make sure that you get the information that we need and how you can best navigate the providers. That will likely be a two-part video because there's quite a little bit of detail. Today, we're really going to just dive into some brief aspects of it. So this came up during a recent consultation with a client. That client said to me that they were aware of a hearing problem for around 10 years or so, but they haven't sought help yet. And when I asked, why is that you haven't taken action, you've been struggling for 10 years, or at least were aware of it for 10 years and struggling for a fair few, they said plainly, I just don't trust your industry. They said they did have a hearing test at some time when they noticed the hearing issues first. But that hearing test lasted like 5 minutes. And then he said, the young lady said they now needed to spend like $13,000, $14,000 on hearing aids, already took 2 devices out of the cupboard. And the patient was kind of super perplexed and decided not to go ahead and walk out. And then over the following weeks and months, they've noticed that pretty much every shopping center has shops with people at the front pulling them in. And there's so much advertising in television and everywhere that they felt there's no transparency. And they really struggled to figure out who's genuine and who's not and who to trust. The result was that client then delayed taking action because of a mistrust in the industry, and they've then taken that to not trust the industry at large. And you know what, to a degree, I can totally understand it. There is confusion and there is distrust, and that often can be rooted, I believe, in not quite understanding the systems, the providers, and the implications. And that is exactly what I want to change. So what I want to do today is I want to break this down into a few segments. Firstly, I want to talk briefly about the devices themselves. Then I want to talk about the relationship between the device and the patient. And then the device and provider relationship before we briefly look at the relationship between the patient and the provider. Let's start with the devices. And I really want to keep it brief. There are literally hundreds of hearing aid options from a variety of manufacturers. Some are suited better for this or for that, and all in all, it's really not which product is the best product out of all of them, but which of the products can be fitted best to address the patient's hearing concerns. There will be more information in later videos. There will be probably quite a lot of them. But let's leave it brief for today. There are many devices. Nearly all of them are great. Which one works best for you is to be determined between you and the clinician, and that takes a little bit of a discussion and so on. Now, what's really important to me is that we talk about the device to the patient relationship. You know, you don't buy a hearing aid like you buy glasses. The process to get hearing devices is so much more complex than that. And it involves that you have to have multiple visits, adjustments, rehabilitation, and even auditory training. It's not just like measuring the hearing, buying a device, and then walking out, even though some clinics do actually operate like that. There's an entire video on how the process should look like if you're interested. We can link that in the description below. In short, I would recommend that you treat your hearing loss like a medical condition that needs a specialist and proper and timely attention. Don't think of quick fixes when it comes to hearing, as they often don't work well, if they even work at all. Let's come briefly to the relationship between the provider of that device and the device itself. This is actually a really important one, especially in Australia. Here, it is quite common for a hearing aid manufacturer to own their own retail stores or even chains. But that is not always very obvious. The government has actually introduced legislation that says that each provider must publicly display their affiliations. For example, if they are owned by a hearing aid manufacturer, we call that vertical integration. But these declarations, they may be a sentence in like font size 8 on one of the various A4 posters that are hanging somewhere in a clinic. I always compare that for my patients to car manufacturers. When you go to a Mercedes dealership, you know where you go. And you know that it's very unlikely that they will recommend you go away and buy a VW. In hearing care in Australia, it's actually similar, just that you don't see on the outside where you walk into. So just be aware that if you go to certain providers, that they may be owned by a manufacturer, like a dedicated hearing aid manufacturer. And as a result, they obviously offer their devices. As Mercedes offers Mercedes cars, that's just what it is when you walk in there. So when you go to one of these manufacturer-owned clinics, you will be offered a device from that manufacturer or manufacturers. And at that time, it's also quite likely that that clinician is not fully aware of technologies outside of their limited scope. In Australia, it's actually that the vast majority of hearing care providers are part of only a few chains. I will have an upcoming video where we deep dive into the provider landscape in Australia. So hang out for that, and that will give you a very clear overview of how Australia looks like when it comes to hearing care providers. But the second reason why I say that the relationship between the provider and the device is so important is that most clinicians kind of have their favorites. If you were to ask any clinicians, they likely have a few favorite manufacturers they work with, or even some favorite products that they like, as they fully understand those devices in much detail. And that actually matters, because the outcome of the fitting journey is really determined by how well the clinician can fit that device to you. Now, if you were to come to me, for example, with a request to fit a certain device that I'm not familiar with, then I normally would feel better sending you to a colleague of mine or even to another clinic if they are more familiar with that device, if they follow best practices. Clinicians really need to know what they are doing, and hence the relationship between the device and the provider is important to consider. Now let's talk about the relationship between the patient and the provider. That is also, I think, a really important one. To get the best possible outcomes, you need to see your hearing care professional a few times, in the beginning at least, and then regularly for years. It's really important that you trust that person, that you can share with them everything you experience, that you can be totally open with them, because then they can address that really well. In a perfect world, you would stay with the same clinician throughout the treatment process for years. In most cases, though, you will find that independent clinics often have a little less capacity, meaning you may need to wait a little while to get an appointment, but often they have more continuity of care, so you normally see the same provider for a long time. Bigger clinics often have more capacity and can get you in very quickly, but you may jump from clinician to clinician, depends on how they operate. You'll just need to choose what's most important for you. Now, if you find yourself struggling to trust our industry, which again, I would fully understand. If you want to find out what's best for you, I suggest the following approach. Look in the area, look around what clinics are around you, and then research who owns them. Are they manufacturer owned? Are they government owned? Are they independently owned? You may even then want to visit a couple of clinics, speak to a couple of providers to find out who you trust and who you kind of feel best with. Ideally, ask them about their fitting process, how they apply fitting principles. If it's a very quick process from like assessment to fitting, I personally would walk away. Devices need to be really well fitted, and that will take a few hours over a few weeks to really get the most out of them. Now, if you want to find a clinician or a clinic near you which is committed to fully following best practice principles in audiology, you can head to the description of the video and there's a link to a provider finder. Now, as always, if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Until then, bye-bye.